Upon a wooden scaffold, an official announces the commencement of Prince Arthur's execution. The crowd below roars, calling him a selfish noble and demanding his head. Kneeling in heavy chains, Arthur wonders what went wrong, questioning what he should have done. The scene unfolds in a vast, circular plaza, the execution platform standing starkly at its center, surrounded by a sea of people gathered under a somber, cloudy sky. A hand steadies itself, using the tip of a quill to draw a precise line across the back of the prince's neck, marking the target. The iron links of his chains shift with a heavy clank. Throughout the crowd, scribes write with feverish intensity, their quills scratching across parchment as they document the historic proceedings for the record. A guard yanks Arthur to his feet. The crowd murmurs that the disgraced prince's powers have been sealed. Arthur grits his teeth, his expression hardening with resolve. His gaze sweeps over the faces of the suffering, the sick, the grieving, the impoverished. A chilling thought crystallizes in his mind. Was this the work of a demon's power? He is led to the edge of the platform, positioned before the executioner's block, the immense weight of the silent, watching crowd pressing in on him. Suddenly, he whirls around, his face a mask of anguish. What did I do wrong? He screams at the onlookers. He demands to know if his failure was in not using his power for the people. Nearby, a composed, well-dressed young man watches the outburst with detached curiosity. His desperate shouts continue to tear through the air. He questions if he was simply ignorant of their pain, or if there was something more, something fundamental he had failed to grasp. With a final, agonized roar, he strains against his bonds. The heavy, power-sealing chains shatter into pieces. The guard leading him whips around in shock, yelling for him to get back. He collapses to the ground, the force of his outburst spent. As he kneels amidst the shattered chains, a single, desperate thought surfaces. Or perhaps his mind plunges into darkness, where he questions his entire life. What had he done wrong? What had he failed to do? Below this swirling confusion, a memory surfaces, the face of a young man looking at him with concern. The memory sharpens. It is his younger brother, Mordred, calling out his name. In the past, Mordred had tried to speak with him, his expression earnest as he attempted to explain something about himself. His brother's words from that day echo in his mind, a stark condemnation. Mordred had told him plainly, "You do not understand the hearts of people." The memory fades, replaced by the grim reality of the execution platform. A chilling realization dawns upon him. He thinks, so that's how it is. A guard shoves him forward as a man in the crowd jeers, telling him to hurry up. Tears stream down Arthur's face as he is struck by the profound agony of being hurt by others. It's so painful, he realizes. He is forced down, his neck positioned in the guillotine's lunette. Surrounded by skeletal figures of death, he cries out in despair, lamenting that no one had ever taught him the truth of this pain. A vision of his past self appears, a confident prince on a throne, surrounded by adoring hands. He had believed then that everything would be fine, so long as everyone simply listened to what he had to say. The vision vanishes. Locked in the device, he gazes out at the world one last time, a final, desperate wish forming in his mind. If only one more time. His view is filled with the smiling faces of the crowd, eagerly awaiting his end. The thought completes itself as the world darkens. I could do my life over. He lay with his neck secured in the guillotine's lunette, the rough wood pressing against his skin. A voice from above, cold and official, offered him a final chance to speak, asking if he had any last words. Hearing the question, tears streamed down his dirt-stained cheeks. A moment of profound sorrow gave way to a faint, almost imperceptible smile of acceptance. With his silence taken as an answer, the mechanism was released. The heavy blade descended with a sharp, metallic hiss as the crowd below watched the final moment unfold. His final thought was not of the life he'd lost, but a simple, terrifying question that flashed through his mind. How much is this going to hurt? The world dissolved into a sensation of falling. But instead of the sharp finality of death, he was ripped back to consciousness by his own scream. He shot upright, gasping for air, his eyes wide with terror and confusion as he found himself not on a scaffold, but in a lavishly decorated room. The room was vast and opulent, a stark contrast to the cold stone of his cell. He sat alone on an enormous, canopied bed, dwarfed by the grandeur of his surroundings. He slowly raised a hand to his chest, feeling the steady rhythm beneath his palm. A single, profound realization struck him. He was alive. The realization sent a jolt of pure ecstasy through him. He leaped into the air, shouting with unrestrained joy. He was alive. He recognized the ornaments confiscated during the revolution and the jewels inherited from his mother. All of it was here. His celebration brought him to a window, where an even more impossible sight greeted him. His castle, which he remembered being burned by the populace, stood tall and whole. He wondered what else remained, realizing that things he had lost, even in his dreams, were now tangible. As he tried to process this new reality, a chorus of voices called out to him. He turned to see a group of maids, their faces bright and smiling, bidding him a good morning and addressing him as Master Arthur. He stared in disbelief as one of the maids announced that his breakfast was ready. The simple statement sent a jolt of pure elation through him, and he cried out, "Breakfast!" The prospect of a real meal, something he hadn't experienced in so long, filled him with an almost manic glee. His outburst left the maid bewildered, questioning his strange behavior. He, however, was lost in the memory of his recent past, or future. It had been so long since he'd had a proper breakfast. After his capture by the Revolutionary Army, his only sustenance had been dry, coarse bread and a thin, watery soup. Shaking his head as if to clear it, he turned and walked away, his small fist clenched with resolve. He tried to convince himself that it was nothing more than a bad dream he had just seen. Behind him, the maid simply watched his retreating form, her confusion lingering in the quiet hallway. An ornate, framed portrait depicts a young man with blonde hair, his chin resting on his hand in a look of melancholy. A voice reflects that it is only natural. He should not be the one facing execution. The perspective shifts to a young, blonde-haired boy in fine clothes, who speaks with great enthusiasm about his own brilliant life. He wonders aloud how it must feel for others to gaze upon his portrait, with two maids standing impassively behind him. He continues, musing that having to add inscriptions to a portrait is surely a pitiable fate. He then confidently declares that Arthur would never be subjected to such a thing, as he wouldn't even deign to look at commoners. His train of thought is shattered by a maid's frantic cry of "Arthur-sama." A short, stout cook rushes into the hall, his face a mask of panic. The cook, wringing his hands in distress, explains that the wheat delivery is late, meaning there will be no bread for breakfast. The young boy's face falls in disappointment as a nearby maid looks on with concern. His dismay lasts only for a moment. A bright idea strikes him, and he cheerfully suggests that if there is no bread, they should simply eat cake instead. He beams, declaring that everything is proceeding according to his life's plan. Moments later, the boy sits at a table in a lush garden, surrounded by attentive maids as he enjoys a slice of cake. He proclaims this to be his everyday life, then leans forward to ask one of the maids if she heard what he said earlier. The maid thoughtfully repeats his words, "If there's no bread, eat cake," before observing that a true prince would say something different. The comment strikes a nerve. The boy's expression darkens as unsettling. Shadowy figures seem to manifest behind him. Visibly shaken, he abruptly stands and runs off, calling out for Arthur. He tells the maids he is returning to his room and instructs them to bring tea later. As he disappears behind a set of grand, ornate doors, two maids watch him go. One expresses her concern, asking if he is all right, but the other calmly reassures her that he'll be fine. Arthur jolts, gasping for breath. The memory of a blessed life as a prince feels so real, yet he knows it was all supposed to be a dream. He questions why the hellish sensations of his true circumstances remain so vivid. Staring at his hands, he sees them shift from the clean palms of royalty to the grimy fingers of a prisoner. The contrast is terrifying. The memory sharpens, and he sees his own trembling, dirt-caked hands reaching out into the darkness before him. His eyes fly open, wide with remembered horror. He squeezes them shut, a futile attempt to block out the flood of images. A vision of violent chaos erupts, a battle, an uprising. From a distance, his brother Mordred watches the fray, identified as the commander of the vanguard. The memory shifts. Arthur watches as revolutionaries seize his younger brother. Mordred struggles, shouting that their actions are disrespectful. From the background, Arthur calls out his brother's name, demanding to know why he would start a revolution. His captors merely laugh, mocking him about money and telling him to scatter it among the common folk. As he struggles, Mordred desperately calls out for his brother. Another fragment surfaces. Mordred, frantic, grabs Arthur by the collar, shouting that their assets are almost gone. Arthur looks down at him coldly, asking what kind of cruelties he has committed. Mordred tries to explain that everyone fled after Arthur was captured, but his brother is unmoved, stating simply that Mordred hasn't changed. The memory concludes with the sharp, final sound of a falling blade. He is thrown back into a memory of searing pain, a jailer's boot grinding into his back. In a vision of the past, he and other prisoners writhe on the cold stone floor. In this memory, the jailer stands over them, whip in hand, and mockingly asks if they have finally come to understand the pain of the common folk. Arthur can only gasp, his fingers scraping weakly against the rough stone. The memory shifts to a later moment, where he is left alone, collapsed on the cold floor of his cell. The jailer's voice echoes from outside the bars, sarcastically bidding farewell to Lord Arthur. Even then, his mind offered no escape, conjuring an image of his brother, Mordred, kneeling before him with a gentle smile. Mordred's voice from that time suggested that if only Arthur could use his ability, things would be different. The recollection is so powerful that it jolts him in the present. Arthur, now free and dressed in fine clothes, gasps and clutches his head as if struck by phantom pain. He remembers the days after the revolution when he was cast out. Day after day, he was forced to endure the hatred of the common people, their attacks adding fresh wounds to his body. His thoughts drift back to the prison, to another recurring memory, a young girl who would greet Lord Arthur and visit him repeatedly. She would take his arm to tend to his pain, and then she would kneel beside him as he lay helpless on the floor. With a smile, she would ask a simple, chilling question. "Are you in pain?" Back in the present, the vividness of the memory shakes him to his core. He presses his hands to his face, wondering just how much of that nightmare is a true recollection. His troubled state is noticed. An attendant, looking down at him with concern, addresses him as Lord Arthur and asks why he is sitting on the floor in such a place. He stares up in sheer terror, sweat beading on his face. The woman from his dreams now stands before him in the flesh, a menacing figure with glowing white eyes and a sinister smile. She looms over him, her presence overwhelming. "Is it painful?" she asks, her voice dripping with malice. As he lies paralyzed, a single thought races through his mind. What is her true identity? Mordred stands stunned in a hallway, recognizing one of the household maids before him. With a cold smile, she declares her dislike for him and lunges forward, causing him to cry out in alarm. A tray with a cup falls to the floor with a clatter. He stares, breathing heavily with a shocked and flustered expression. He points accusingly at the maid, who has fallen to the ground. He yells that it's her fault for opening the door so suddenly, insisting that his reaction was simply self-defense. His anger fades as he notices her hand is scraped and bleeding from the fall. She holds it up silently. He quickly turns away, trying to dismiss the sight and muttering that it has nothing to do with him. As he does, a sharp, painful memory flashes through his mind, the face of a young girl crying out. The maid's demeanor changes completely. She rushes to his side, her voice filled with concern as she asks if he is injured. Mordred looks up, startled by her sudden shift in attitude. She tells him that this power isn't exclusive to Arthur, and that if he possesses the same ability, he should be able to use it. As she speaks, Mordred clutches his head, the image of a woman from his memories surfacing once more. The memory sharpens into a clear vision. His brother, Arthur, kneeling in a prison cell, speaking to the mysterious girl through the bars. He recalls the thought that, in that oppressive place, she was the only one. The flood of conflicting images overwhelms him. He screams, clutching his head in agony, shouting that he doesn't understand. He questions why he only has painful memories and what this particular memory even means. He looks up, his expression one of pure distress. The maid watches him as he whispers Arthur's name, his own sense of self beginning to fracture as he trails off, saying, "Because I..." He stares in confusion, not feeling the pain that should be there. The maid looks up at him with wide, concerned eyes, asking if he is all right. He glances down at his hand, covered in fresh scratches, and insists that he is fine. From the floor where she fell, she asks to see his hand. Taking her injured hand gently, he apologizes to her, acknowledging that it must be painful. She looks up at him, flustered by the gesture. He announces that this is his ability and that he will heal her now. A brilliant light envelopes their hands as he explains that it is healing magic, and the wounds on her skin vanish completely. He asks if the pain is gone, but she reacts with alarm, shouting his brother's name. "Arthur Sama." She protests that such a precious power should not be used on a common maid like herself. Mordred is stunned to be called by his brother's name. The maid quickly tries to cover her mistake, stammering that she was just surprised he would do such a thing for Prince Arthur. As she fumbles for words, Mordred turns and walks away. He stops and places a hand over his chest, turning back to her. He confesses that when he looks at her, his chest aches. The maid stares, taken aback by his words. She erupts in a flustered blush, stammering incoherently at the unexpected confession. He simply watches her reaction, his expression unchanged. He looks down at his own hand as a faint magical glow fades away. A realization surfaces with certainty. That was the first time he had ever healed a commoner. A memory surfaces of a tutor asking a young Arthur if he understands that the royal family's healing magic is a precious gift. The tutor instructs that it must only be used as directed by the education officer. As Arthur agrees, a younger Mordred sits beside him, listening. He recalled the strict lessons he had been taught since childhood. Standing in a vast library, he decided he would report healing the maid to the education officer later. His hand then brushed against a different, tattered volume. He pulled it from the shelf, wondering what this shabby book could be. It wasn't a grimoire, but perhaps a notebook or a diary. The first page was simply marked, Year 21. As he began to read, the words described a shocking event. A revolution had occurred, and as a result, someone named Arthur Pendragon II was executed. The horrifying account struck him with physical force. He flung the book away, crying out in disbelief at what he perceived to be a sick and twisted chronicle. The book lay open on the floor. He tried to turn away, but a dreadful curiosity gnawed at him, making it impossible to ignore. Compelled by this feeling, he knelt and picked the diary up once more. He forced himself to read on, absorbing the grim timeline. One entry noted the year the younger brother's revolution succeeded. Another stated that Prince Arthur was captured and imprisoned in a mansion. A third specified that the prince was 20 years old at the time. His eyes widened in terror as he read the final words on the page, describing the end of an interrogation and the final destination, the guillotine. The shock caused a small hourglass to fall from a nearby surface, shattering on the floor. The sound cemented a horrifying thought in his mind. This was not a dream. It was real. He collapses to his knees amidst the wreckage of the shattered hourglass, hands pressed to his head in a panic. The horrifying realization crashes down upon him. Time has rewound. He is back before the execution. He understands now. The events in the diary, the beheading, that is the fate that will befall him. His eyes, wide with terror, dart down to the book in his hands. A sudden noise snaps him out of his trance. Elsewhere, a maid with long, light hair stands at the top of a staircase, her expression fraught with worry. She explains to another servant what she overheard from the other maids, that Lord Arthur has been captured. The maid reports this dire news to Goyoku, the prince's tutor. She insists that it's true, but the large man simply crosses his arms, dismissing any mention of Arthur with a thoughtful hum. His contemplative facade shatters. Goyoku lunges forward, grabbing the maid violently. His face twists with suspicion as he snarls, demanding to know if she used her body to seduce someone. He holds her fast as she protests her innocence, pleading for him to release her. From a distance, two other maids watch the scene unfold, paralyzed with fear. The tutor sneers, reminding her that she cannot defy a nobleman. He muses aloud that it would be perfectly fine for the prince to be ruined by a woman. The watching maids gasp in terror, unsure what to do. A memory surfaces. The mysterious woman holds a young boy, who looks like Arthur, and instructs him to use his body to take care of the prince, promising a special allowance in return. The maid, younger herself, watches this exchange with tears in her eyes, horrified by what she has witnessed. In another memory, a young Mordred steps forward, placing himself between the distressed maid and the mysterious woman. He looks up at the woman defiantly, demanding to know what she meant by what she said to him and the maid. In the past, the tutor Gyoku smirks, holding a small object while looking down at a sleeping young Arthur. The lead maid, her face etched with worry, cries out the young prince's name in distress. A young Mordred observes this, noting that the maid had been scolding another servant. Goyoku, walking away with the maid, dismisses the incident as nothing of consequence. The tutor tells her not to worry and that he will take his leave, but the maid clenches her fist in frustration, curtly stating that she understands. As he turns to depart, a voice calls out, stopping him in his tracks. "Wait, Goyoku." It is Mordred who called to him. The young prince approaches, a confident look on his face, and asks for a moment of the tutor's time, declaring that he feels as if he has been reborn. He explains his request to the surprised tutor, stating that there is something he wishes to do for his brother, Arthur. With a disarmingly sweet smile, Mordred asks Goyoku to let him see the estate's account books. The request instantly shatters the tutor's composure, causing him to break out in a nervous sweat. The prince's reasoning is simple. He recalls his fiancée telling him that it is a prince's duty to do a little work. Goyoku's face contorts with anxiety, his eyes darting back and forth as he stammers, completely caught off guard. Mordred maintains his pleasant demeanor, reassuring the flustered man that as the head of education, he has nothing to worry about. In response to the prince's quiet demand, Goyoku attempted to change the subject, offering to reward him for his efforts. Nearby, the lead maid grew flustered, thinking to herself that the hands she had just treated were already covered in burns and calluses from her work. Ignoring the offer, Mordred instead moved behind the tutor, who was now seated. He began massaging the man's shoulders, declaring that he would heal Goyoku's stiffness. The maid, startled by the turn of events, quickly scurried away. As the prince's hands worked on his tense muscles, Goyoku began to sweat, a look of deep unease on his face. He could only mutter under his breath about what a willful prince he was, reluctantly submitting to the strange gesture. Arthur observes his tutor, Goyoku, remarking that nobles rarely suffer injuries and questions why he doesn't simply delegate tasks to servants. Goyoku appears confused by the prince's line of questioning. Leaning in with a knowing smile, he places a hand on his tutor's shoulder, explaining that Goyoku reminds him of the countess he once brought to the palace. The memory surfaces, the countess, elegantly dressed, complaining to a younger Arthur that her hand was in pain. Goyoku had inquired about the matter, and she presented her hand, lamenting that as someone from a merchant family, such a thing was a source of shame. Yet, in another memory, that same countess was seen gleefully counting her money, a sight that made the young prince realize she had been laughing at them. Returning to the present, he grips Goyoku's hand, observing that it appears to be in considerable pain. His examination becomes more specific as he points out that Goyoku's fingertips are oily, a detail he remembers from the countess as well. Goyoku lets out a forced laugh, dismissing the prince's observation as mean-spirited. He claims that he, too, is from a merchant family, but Arthur's sharp, skeptical gaze remains fixed on him. From a distance, the lead maid scoffs at the exchange, finding it pathetic that they would depend on servants for everything. A single, damning thought cuts through the air. Liar. The pretense shatters. Arthur leans in, his voice low and menacing, and declares that the money Goyoku so diligently counts each day is, in fact, his own. The maids gasp in shock at the prince's sudden aggression. He tells Goyoku that an undeserved wound can be easily erased, especially by him. With his foot pressing down firmly, he demands that Goyoku hand over his account books. The scene shifts to an almost surreal image of Arthur pinning a terrified Goyoku to the ground in a bed of flowers. With a bright, unsettling smile, he muses that Goyoku is helpless and ignorant of the world, then poses a chilling question. Wouldn't it be a joyous occasion for Prince Arthur to set him on a new course? His violent demand was met with a choked gasp from Goyoku, who stammered that he was simply moved by Prince Arthur's growth. Releasing the man, Arthur's demeanor shifted instantly. He leaned forward with a serene smile, expressing his heartfelt joy at the tutor's sentiment. His words were met with unexpected adoration from the maids who had witnessed the exchange. They clasped their hands together, exclaiming how magnificent Prince Arthur was. He was taken aback by their praise, a blush creeping up his neck. As the maids walked away, one gushed about how he had stood up for them, a notion he awkwardly tried to dismiss. Putting their reactions out of his mind, he settled down with the ledgers. He mused that he could finally relax now that he was being productive, all while a horrified Goyoku realized his ill-gotten gains were being exposed. Having made his point, he turned to leave, encouraging the maids to rest for the day. As he walked away, the lead maid called out his name. She watched him go, a blush on her cheeks. Her companion noted how flustered she was, but the lead maid was lost in thought, reflecting on how kind he truly was. Later that night, under a full moon, the estate's garden was quiet. The tranquility was broken by Arthur's frustration. He had been poring over the documents, hoping to find a way to avoid his execution, but the numbers offered no clear path to salvation. With a cry of exasperation, he flung the papers into the air. As the documents fluttered down around him, he knelt in defeat. But then, a sudden realization struck him as odd. He frantically searched through the scattered sheets, discovering that the crucial page listing Goyoka's stolen assets was gone. The discovery sent a jolt through him. He understood immediately. The future had shifted, even if only slightly. He berated himself, realizing he should have gathered all the proof before making his move. He stumbles back, reeling from the realization that his knowledge is flawed. He cries out in frustration, questioning the point of knowing the future if it isn't set in stone. His thoughts a chaotic storm of revolution and an unpredictable fate. His mind fixates on the ultimate consequence he sought to avoid. He screams that this isn't the kind of change he wanted. In the end, the guillotine still awaits him. In the depths of his despair, he feels a gentle, steadying pressure. A small, doll-like creature with button eyes is holding him close. He looks up, startled, to see the lead maid standing before him. She holds the doll out with a faint, knowing smile, and Arthur can only stare, bewildered by her sudden appearance. His mind flashes back to the source of his foreknowledge, a book that laid out his path. It had presented a clear objective: heal a maid and repel a nobleman's advances to earn good deed points. Now, he questions if these very actions are the cause of the future's divergence. A new resolve hardens within him. If fate is mutable, he will become its master. He decides to flatter the world, to please its people, and to sell his favors. With his healing magic, he concludes with dark confidence: victory will be effortless. Before a grand manor, Prince Arthur points decisively at a young maid, his expression beaming with excitement. He announces that he is appointing her as his personal attendant. The maid and another attendant nearby are frozen in stunned silence. The weight of his declaration crashes down on her. Her face twists in panic as she clasps her hands together, convinced that her short life as a maid has just come to an abrupt and terrible end. Her distress echoes through the residence, reaching the head maid, Marianu, who appears in her private quarters. Clad in fine lingerie, Marianu calls out, asking what is wrong. The young maid, now a mess of tears, can only whimper the head maid's name in response. Marianu calmly explains the situation to the still shocked maid. She confirms that Prince Arthur did indeed request a personal attendant and reminds her that a maid's duty is to serve, adding that she believed the younger maid would be a great success. The maid nervously replies that she was initially just told to do her best. Later, Arthur clarifies his motive to her. He explains that he wants to accumulate good deeds to win the favor of the common people, believing it will make it easier for him to act. He chose her, he says, because she is one of them and therefore easier for him to understand. A memory surfaces of Arthur kneeling to help a young girl who had fallen, becoming her personal maid for a moment to tend to her injury. The maid recalls this act of kindness, a gentle smile forming on her face as she understands his intentions. She reports back to Arthur, initially pleased that the good deed was done. However, her expression quickly sours as she admits that it's no good. Arthur's face falls with disappointment as he sees that despite everyone's happiness, his own face now looks sad in her eyes. The pressure becomes unbearable. She cries out in anguish, her voice cracking as she insists that the burden is far too heavy for her to carry. Her outburst fades into a quiet, defeated whisper. She looks down, admitting to herself that it simply didn't go well at all. Finally, facing Marianu, she confesses her deepest insecurity. With tears welling in her eyes, she states that she doesn't have the confidence to be his personal maid. The head maid listens with a stern, unreadable expression as the young maid breaks down completely. She reeled back in shock, her mind fixating on a completely unrelated detail, blurting out a question about 2 shots. In response, head maid Marianu calmly stated that Prince Arthur must have had some intention when he gave the order. The lead maid, still processing, asked if this was her responsibility, and Marianu affirmed it. Determined, the lead maid declared that she needed to know why the prince had chosen her. Marianu continued, asking what the lead maid wanted from her, offering to grant her wish. The head maid then mused that Arthur, who carries many burdens, might have specifically chosen a straightforward commoner girl who knows nothing of his world. The head maid leaned closer, revealing a critical piece of information. Prince Arthur's mother was a commoner. She suggested that perhaps the prince saw the image of his mother in the lead maid, who could only echo the word, mother. The lead maid recalled a flustered conversation with Arthur. She had confirmed with him that he had indeed said he didn't want to do anything lewd as his exclusive maid. He, blushing and shaking, affirmed it, embarrassed that she had heard him directly. Her mind raced with the new information. If she was to be a mother figure, then she should simply pamper the prince. As she pondered this, she overheard other maids gossiping that nobles often have peculiar hobbies, with one mentioning baby play. Just then, Marianu appeared in a doorway, handing her a bag and encouraging her to do her best. From it, she pulled a piece of frilly, lacy underwear, her face contorting in horror. In the background, Marianu, now outside, flushed red, and insisted it was nothing, but the lead maid shrieked for the head maid, completely scandalized. Having delivered her advice, Marianu walked off with a confident smile. The lead maid, taking the suggestion to heart, immediately approached Prince Arthur as he tended to some plants. He looked up, startled, as she presented him with a baby bottle, asking what was wrong. She declared that as his exclusive maid, she would now engage in baby play with him. The attempt quickly devolved into a frantic chase, with the lead maid pursuing a horrified Arthur with a baby bottle. He yelled at her to stop, calling her noisy, but she remained determined. He finally stopped, panting that he needed to rest for a moment. Seizing the opportunity, the lead maid nervously suggested he perform bed-making by using her lap as a pillow. Arthur could only stare back, aghast, shouting, "On your lap?" He finds himself resting his head on the lead maid's lap as she cheerfully insists that a lap pillow is relaxing. She points to the sky, remarking on how beautiful it is, but he dazedly replies that he can't see anything. Nearby, another maid offers to fetch him some tea with extra milk. The lead maid's intensity escalates as she shouts that she is all he needs. The overwhelming situation causes Arthur to collapse. As the other maid questions her actions, the lead maid decides he must rest in his room, a blush creeping onto her face as she thinks his name. After seeing him to his room, she stands outside, flustered. Believing he is still depressed, she resolves to enact her final plan, steeling herself to do whatever it takes. Moments later, she pushes open his door, calling his name as she steps into the room dressed in revealing lingerie. She climbs onto his bed, leaning over him and asking if her presence will cheer him up, only to find he is fast asleep. She whispers his name, then quietly apologizes. He stirs in his sleep, murmuring. She watches him, realizing he must be having a nightmare, and reflects that she didn't know how to help him. His eyes flutter open, and he immediately apologizes. She looks at him with concern, asking about what had just happened. He explains that Marianu and the other maids were very happy. He then clarifies that it was the head maid who helped him, finally recalling her name. He continues, admitting that he hadn't known her name until this moment and had never truly seen any of them as individuals. He muses that his own actions invited this strange outcome. Confused, she asks what he means. He confesses that he doesn't truly know himself. He finds it difficult to explain his circumstances to someone like her, who has only known peace. He concludes that while it may sound simple, this is the person he has become. He quietly tells her that if she cannot understand, she is free to ask anyone else. He then looks at her directly, asking if she truly understands. The head maid, Marianu, acknowledges that it is a difficult thing to grasp, but affirms that she does. As he falls silent, she offers a solution they can figure out together. She admits she is only a rookie maid and they are strangers, but suggests they can get to know each other starting now. She gently asks if he is willing to try. His expression softens into a smile as he agrees, stating that he can do it. He promises that this time, he will make a proper effort. Overcome with relief, Marianu is simply happy that he has finally smiled. From across the bed, he playfully remarks on her reaction. She retorts that he smiled as well, a shared moment of levity passing between them. The scene shifts to the past. A much younger Arthur tells a young Marianu that while his mother might be difficult, his older sister would likely be fine. He addresses her by name, but she seems confused about what he is discussing. He continues, telling her he wants her to get to know them properly. He then points at her, declaring with a smile that Marianu is the staple of his life, for better or worse. The sudden declaration leaves her utterly flustered. Her face flushes as she stammers his name, overwhelmed. The other young maids erupt in excitement, shocked that the prince used Marianu's first name. They crowd around him, eagerly introducing themselves as Elise and Lilia, pleading for him to remember their names too. With a sigh, the young prince turns and walks toward a garden, beckoning for them to follow him. In the rose garden, Marianu holds a freshly picked bouquet, remarking that he wasn't as scary as she thought. The young Arthur explains that just as he didn't know them, they didn't know him. He concludes that he needs to get to know her as well. He proposes that they get to know each other from now on. He offers a gentle smile, and she looks back at him, her expression thoughtful as she takes in his words. He looked at the young maid before him. Though it was belated, he asked for her name, and then, more formally, requested that she become his personal maid. The girl's face lit up with a brilliant smile, framed by a cascade of light. She introduced herself as Kay, declaring that from that day forward, she would be his exclusive maid. And so, her new life began. Her initial joy, however, quickly gave way to flustered concern. Kay admitted there was still much she didn't understand, but Arthur playfully held up a notebook, teasing that he would document all her good deeds in it. She protested, telling him not to read it, but he simply encouraged her, saying they would do their best together. He found it refreshing to call her by name, something he had only ever done with relatives. He then dashed away, laughing gleefully. Kay, he called back over his shoulder, admitting with a wide grin that he simply wanted to try saying her name. Kay watched him go, a thoughtful expression settling on her face. He had called her by her first name, an intimacy he claimed was reserved for family. As she looked at the beautiful boy, a question formed in her mind. Could he possibly be her fiancé? The young maid Kay looks on in shock, her hands clasped near her face. She calls out to Arthur, questioning how this could have happened. He responds with a confident smile, touching his chin as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. He simply states that it's only natural. Later, as he eats a meal at a table, Kay expresses her delight that he is eating the onions she prepared, something he usually dislikes. She happily remarks that his kindness has given her the courage she needs and that she wants to go help someone soon. As she continues to watch him eat, she addresses him once more. She beams, explaining that what he did is a perfect example of noblesse oblige, the duty of the powerful to protect the common people. The statement hits Arthur with such force that he freezes mid-bite, a piece of food dropping from his fork. He remains flustered, sweating as he processes her words. Kay, oblivious to his discomfort, simply smiles and calls his way of thinking wonderful. As the phrase noblesse oblige lingers in the air, a paper airplane zips past to surprise Kay. The words trigger a memory for Arthur, who grips a knife with a grim and determined look, thinking of someone from his past. The paper airplane strikes him squarely on the head. He yelps, grabbing the folded note and shouting about its disrespectfulness. Kay calls out his name in concern, wondering what could possibly be written on it. Together, they unfold the paper, their expressions turning to horror. The note is filled with a torrent of crude, hateful, and threatening words. He trembles, looking around frantically. He wonders aloud who could have done such a thing, insisting that no one like that should be anywhere near them. In that moment, a woman appears before them, wielding a massive, ornate scythe. She speaks the very words that started it all, noblesse oblige. Arthur stares, aghast, and yells at her not to appear so suddenly. His mind recoiled from the sudden confrontation, plunging back into a painful memory. A young noblewoman, Morgan Le Fay, had arrived. While a cheerful Kay welcomed her, he could only stare in dread as Morgan asked if he was ready for their tea time. Kay started towards him, calling his name, but Morgan intercepted her, suggesting it was better if the two of them were alone. He could only lament that Kay, having just met her, was completely unaware of the kind of person Morgan truly was. Her words from that time, when she was just 11, echoed in his memory. She had callously questioned why, if the people lacked bread and cake, they didn't just eat wheat, calling him a fool. The memory shifted again to a time he was sick in bed. Even then, she had come to him, addressing him as Prince Arthur. He was suddenly drowning in a sea of paper, the overwhelming voice of the people threatening to consume him. Buried under the endless documents, he asked in disbelief if they were all petitions and complaints. From nearby, Morgan simply watched him. She then leaped onto his desk, her face inches from his, delivering a stark warning. If this continued, a revolution would ignite. Her eyes bored into his as she demanded that he, Prince Arthur, solve the crisis immediately. The pressure became unbearable. He erupted, screaming about the impossible volume of work and throwing the petitions into the air in a complete panic. The memory left him frozen in the present, consumed by the thought of his own foolishness. Morgan's voice cut through his terror, asking if he was afraid of her, as a bewildered Kay looked on. He remains frozen in terror as Morgan Le Fay dismisses the idea of him being her fiancé. Seeing the tension, Kay rushes forward, offering tea and sweets to Lady Morgan in a flustered attempt to intervene. Morgan thanks Kay by name, surprising the young maid, but politely declines the offer. As she turns, Arthur cautiously peeks out from behind a pillar, still shaking. Her expression hardens as she continues, speaking of the common folk who are currently struggling, so poor they lack even a single bean to eat. The words trigger a painful memory for Arthur, who recalls the infamous sentiment, if they have no bread, let them eat cake. The thought fills him with renewed horror. Suddenly, Morgan grabs him by the collar, her voice sharp and accusatory. She tells him she didn't come to see him, but because she must do what he will not. She declares that he is different, foolishly concerned only with the prince's matters. She shoves him to the floor and turns away, announcing that a revolution is imminent, and it is not because of him. As Morgan walks off, Kay watches, realizing she is gone. On the ground, Arthur begins to weep, clutching a piece of paper. He laments that he was trying his best, even if it seemed pitiful to her. Kay looks over his shoulder at the document in his hand. Elsewhere, in a grand library, Goyoku, the prince's former tutor, addresses Morgan. He asks her purpose for visiting and remarks on how spoiled she has become. Ignoring him for a moment, she turns to two maids, one of whom is Kay. Morgan looks down on them, questioning if their shabby clothes are truly all they have to wear in her presence. With a confident smile, Morgan turns back to Goyoku and declares her true purpose. She will have him dismissed. She reveals that she was the one who gathered the petitions from the suffering commoners, and she will now use them to purify the royal family. She remains silent as Goyoku's voice boomed, accusing the little brat of getting carried away. Morgan reflected that with the royal family's power, she could make such problems disappear, but she had made a rash promise. He lunged forward, grabbing her as he demanded to know if she was trying to break her engagement to the prince. Clutching her chest, she cried out that he was wrong, insisting that she possessed the spirit of noblesse oblige. His face contorted with menace as he loomed over her, snarling that Prince Arthur would do nothing to stop it. Before he could make another move, the doors to the chamber burst open. A maid Kay flew into the room with a powerful kick, shouting the very words, noblesse oblige. Behind her, Prince Arthur stood, his expression firm. Goyoku could only stare in shock. His shock quickly curdled into fury. He demanded to know why this girl was trying to have him banished. As he raged, Kay quietly advised Arthur not to get his hopes up, stating that she would be the one to resolve this. The prince simply gave her a thumbs up, placing his faith in her. The tutor continued his tirade, accusing Morgan of orchestrating a scheme to slander him and usurp the royal family's affection, vowing to have her punished. From their hiding spot, Kay confirmed to Arthur that this was exactly as they had anticipated. Morgan, however, remained perfectly composed. She corrected him, stating that she was the one being ostracized and hated. She then spoke into the air, asking, "Isn't that right, Prince Arthur?" Her gaze hardened. She explained that she had been threatened, and that this talk of revolution was no laughing matter. As Kay asked the prince if he truly believed Morgan, Arthur knelt and took Morgan's hand. Morgan met his gaze, confirming that if things continued on their current path, the revolution would happen exactly as he had foreseen. Goyoku stormed forward, demanding to know what they were plotting. Kay intercepted him, telling him to be quiet while Arthur was concentrating. The prince's attention was fixed on a pile of papers scattered on the floor. He finally understood. They were petitions, a collection of good deeds. This was the message Morgan had been trying to send him all along. He stared down at the scattered papers, a wave of confusion washing over him. These were the documents that had caused such a commotion. His maid, Kay, observed that this was what Morgan had been calling a revolution. As Arthur picked one up, he realized it was a letter from Morgan herself and wondered about its contents. Kay, however, saw the truth written on the petitions. They were not insults, but desperate pleas from the populace. A child wanting to go to school, a warning of disease spreading in the slums. A horrified understanding dawned on her. She couldn't possibly show these to Arthur in their current state. Morgan, meanwhile, looked on in silent distress. For Morgan, these letters were the anguished voices of the people. She knew that inciting a revolution was an unreasonable path, yet she had been fighting this battle all by herself for so long, surrounded by the faces of the suffering. In a moment of desperation, she had folded her last hope into a paper airplane and sent it flying, praying someone would notice. That someone was Arthur, who now held her message in his hands. Her voice trembled as she looked up from the ground, asking if he believed her. A determined smile spread across Arthur's face as he clutched the petitions tightly. He did believe her, he confirmed, because he himself had actually been executed. He then extended a hand to Morgan. For her sake, he would go and help those people. This, he declared with conviction, was noblesse oblige, the obligation of the nobility. His initial thought was to investigate the matter on his own, but he quickly saw that both Morgan and Kay were already preparing to accompany him, with Kay shouldering a large sack for the journey. Morgan readily agreed to let them join. She explained that many people in need gather at a place she manages called Avalon. With the alliance forged, Kay expressed a relief that Arthur was safe. Nearby, Goyoka trembled with rage, shouting that they were all truly ignorant. Arthur, however, simply looked forward with resolve. Ignoring the furious tutor, the three stood together. Morgan gently offered Arthur a cloth, a silent gesture solidifying their new, united front. As the new alliance settled, Morgan Le Fay brought a hand to her lips, a faint, contemplative sound escaping her as she considered their path forward. Her contemplation was interrupted by Mordred, who looked up at her with a knowing grin. He remarked that it felt as though she could see the future, a strange sense of déjà vu hanging in the air. Morgan's smile widened slightly as she looked down at him, musing aloud about Prince Arthur. It was, she noted, incredibly convenient that he had come to her, of all people, for assistance. A carriage rumbles along a dusty road. Inside, Mordred sits across from Morgan Le Fay and Kay, a thoughtful expression on his face. He muses that the people's discontent is being channeled toward a place called Avalon, and that their arrival there will likely trigger a chaotic free-for-all. Standing outside, Kay observes that their destination seems quite lively. Morgan, however, gazes ahead with deep concern, turning to ask Mordred if Prince Arthur will truly be all right. The scene shifts, rewinding to a few hours prior, under a calm and quiet sky. During a break in their journey, Morgan remarks that it's her first time on such a long carriage ride and encourages Kay to rest. Nearby, Mordred sits apart from them, engrossed in a book, while a man in a cap drinks from a flask. The tranquility is violently shattered. An assailant with a ponytail brutally attacks another man, screaming that he won't provide healing for the scumbag prince. As another victim lies incapacitated on the ground, Kate cries out in alarm. Mordred, however, watches the assault with an unervingly calm and focused gaze. In response to the violence, he rises to his feet, book held firmly in one hand. A wave of energy erupts from the ground before him, cracking the earth with a sharp, crystalline sound. He stands silently amidst the aftermath as the assailants stare back, one of them shouting in fury at his interference. Completely unfazed, Mordred holds his book and a writing stylus, calmly stating that they should reach their destination by evening. In the background, Morgan and Kay look on, utterly astonished by his composure. Later, as they resume their journey, Morgan remarks on how calm he was during the incident. Mordred explains that Prince Arthur's healing ability activates the instant he is hurt, so he feels no pain, only the shock and surprise of the blow. His composure suddenly shatters. Face down and deeply flustered, Mordred exclaims that he wrote about the event in his notebook, as if he himself were the one being attacked. He remarks that his reflexes feel dull, prompting Morgan to announce that she will proceed to Avalon on her own. She instructs him to stay and observe the town, to learn about the lives of the common people. As she begins to walk away, he shouts after her, questioning if she has suddenly had a change of heart regarding him. She turns back, explaining that since they have time, she will guide them through the castle town, especially since dangerous people, like those they encountered earlier, are about. Kay then addresses Mordred as Arthur-sama, referring to herself as his older sister. While walking through a cobble square, Kay points to a vendor and asks Morgan what she is selling. Morgan replies that it is a popular toy in the town. He examines the toy, a ball on a string attached to a handle, and wonders aloud if the point is to stab it. With a wide grin, he enthusiastically thrusts the handle forward. Finding the toy more difficult than expected, he struggles with it as they continue through the bustling streets. Kay watches the townsfolk, realizing that each person lives their own distinct life. The observation solidifies a newfound desire to see Arthur. Suddenly, a small child bumps into Morgan. She glares down with clear irritation, but Mordred quickly grabs her arm and pulls her along, remarking that their personalities are just too different. Nearby, another child enjoys a dark, round snack. The simple scene is interrupted when a sweet aroma catches Mordred's attention, causing him to pause and search for its source. The scent leads them to a stall where an elderly woman sells cookies. Morgan happily declares her love for the sweet treats and asks if her brother likes them too. The baker warmly encourages them to buy as many as they'd like. Standing before a large stone gate, Morgan notes that the atmosphere feels heavier than she expected. The mood shifts as Kay turns to Mordred with a serious gaze. She states her belief that he came to this place to save the people and then directly asks him for confirmation. Before he could answer Kay's question, Morgan's voice cut through, explaining that Avalon is the place she manages, a repository for the voices of the suffering populace. She looked at him intently, demanding to know his resolve. He took the document she presented, a single sheet filled with the sorrow and anger of a formal accusation. As he read, Kay watched him, a faint blush coloring her cheeks. His gaze lifted from the page, his expression hardening. Addressing Kay as Arthur-sama, he declared that with his healing abilities, he could resolve the plight of the sick and injured. Morgan's earlier question echoed, asking if he truly possessed the resolve to accept such a task. Suddenly, he slammed his hands on the table before Morgan, shouting in vehement denial. The very idea seemed impossible to him. Collecting himself, he began to explain his reasoning. This wasn't a simple matter of healing individuals. It was a systemic problem the entire kingdom was facing. Morgan listened, a look of understanding dawning on her face. He then laid out the core issues: the disparity between the people and the nobility, problems with food distribution, and the monopolization of healing magic. He argued that using the prince's authority to tackle these root causes would be far more effective. Kay, however, looked concerned by this impersonal, top-down approach. A wave of triumphant excitement washed over him, his eyes sparkling. Morgan noted with approval that he was thinking things through properly, a sentiment Kay quietly affirmed. His enthusiasm was boundless. Morgan advised him to trust in Arthur for now, and he readily agreed. He then proudly revealed a notebook, explaining he had memorized a list of good deeds to perform. Declaring it the perfect day to win Morgan over completely, he pointed towards a nearby building, announcing their destination, an orphanage. The institution's director stared, utterly aghast. He stood before the assembled children, arms spread wide, and proclaimed that he was there to change their very destiny. Amid the grand declaration, the stunned director stumbled, a wooden bucket toppling over his head. A figure in a white cloak makes a startled sound as a wooden bucket is suddenly slammed down over their head, completely obscuring their vision. The impact sends the bucket-headed figure stumbling as a chaotic scene unfolds. A group of children, announced as the second unit, charges forward in a playful assault, much to the wide-eyed shock of the maid Kay. Just a few minutes prior, Arthur, Kay, and Morgan Le Fay had arrived at an orphanage. As they approached, Arthur quietly contemplated the morning's events, a hint of concern on his face. Their arrival was met with a wave of pure joy from the orphanage director and the children, who rushed out to welcome them. The director, weeping with emotion, greeted Arthur as godfather. He explained that Morgan had told him of the visit, and he was so moved he couldn't stop crying. In the background, Morgan looked on with a faint smile, while Kay confirmed to Arthur that this was indeed the plan. He continued to express his profound gratitude, humbled that Arthur would visit them. In response, Arthur gazed at the children with a determined glint in his eyes, declaring that this was the place where he would change his destiny. He then warmly thanked them all. He then turned his full attention to the orphans, making an announcement. For today, they could do anything they wanted to him. As he spoke, he lifted a nearby bucket and decisively placed it over his own head. His invitation unleashed a storm of joyful chaos. The children swarmed him, playfully striking him as if he were a game, with hit counters materializing in the air. In the midst of the pandemonium, Kay was knocked to the ground, crying out Arthur's name in alarm. After the game subsided, Kay, still on the floor, apologized profusely for the ruckus. Arthur, however, ignored the apology and reached a hand down toward the children, gently asking if they were hurt. He noted their mischievousness, prompting another apology from a flustered Kay. He removed the bucket, revealing a kind and reassuring smile. He told the children that it's not okay to hit their friends hard enough to injure them. He assured them that he wasn't hurt and that their mischief was fine, so long as they understood the lesson. The children all agreed meekly. Witnessing this gentle display of character, the orphanage director was once again overcome with emotion, his face contorting as he wept. He marveled aloud at how saintly Arthur was, a sentiment clearly shared by Kay, who looked on with deep admiration. While Arthur was occupied, Morgan Le Fay found herself flustered by the other children's familiarity. She insisted they were being too forward, chiding them to study hard and become proper adults. Overwhelmed, she demanded they leave her alone, complaining that they were saying things she herself had just said. Elsewhere in the orphanage, Arthur's attention was drawn to a solitary boy sitting high up on a wooden beam. He called out to him, and another child explained that the boy, whom they called Yes, was one who always tried his best, even to the point of death. Arthur looked on with a somber understanding. He pointed up at the boy, repeating the phrase, "Trying your best even if it kills you," and then asked if that was his doing. The boy flinched in surprise. Moments later, with the child now on the ground floor, Arthur knelt before him, gently asking if he was in pain and offering to treat his ailment. His offer caused a stir among the other orphans, who whispered amongst themselves, questioning if he could truly cure the boy's sickness and if he had the money for it. Peeking through a doorway, Morgan wondered if Arthur was being serious. The boy, sweating and looking down, quietly confirmed his name was Beatty. As this unfolded, the orphanage director explained Beatty's grave situation to Kay. He recounted how Beatty had been attacked by a demon, allowing poison to enter his body. In a desperate attempt to save him, they had amputated his arm, but it was too late. The poison had already spread. For the poor, the director lamented, healing magic was nothing more than a dream. They were simply waiting for him to die. Beatty told Arthur it was hopeless, that this was his fate from birth. He urged Arthur to use his money to buy good food for the other children instead. At the same time, Kay recalled hearing that Arthur had used his own funds to make arrangements at the orphanage, questioning if the maid with him was part of the process. Arthur, holding a stack of papers, challenged the boy's resignation. If it was so hopeless, he asked, why was Beatty studying so hard? He sternly told him not to touch the books. Beatty lashed out, shouting that it might not heal him, but still, his defiance faded, and he slumped to the floor in despair. In a sudden, decisive movement, he seized Beatty's arm and pulled him to his feet. Morgan and Kay cried out his name in shock at the abrupt action. He glowed with a faint, powerful light, his gaze locked on the startled boy. He told Beatty that he understood, that he could see how desperately he was fighting against his own fate. Leaning in close, their foreheads nearly touching, he proposed that they both do their best together. With a glimmer of hope returning to his eyes, Beatty quietly agreed. He holds a young boy, Beatty, whose arm is now completely free of the demonic poison. The orphanage director falls to his knees in disbelief, stammering that it's a miracle. Arthur, looking at the healed arm, agrees that it is indeed the power of a miracle. As the other orphans look on, Kay approaches and asks if he used healing magic. From a short distance away, Morgan Le Fay scoffs at the idea. She internally dismisses the act, believing he didn't use magic but simply cheated by using a good deed note. Arthur looks down at Beatty with a gentle expression. He acknowledges the boy's pain and hardship, explaining that he couldn't abandon him after seeing how hard he was fighting to live. Meanwhile, Mordred stands alone, his expression unreadable. Kay approaches him, remarking that he seems to be all talk. She reminds him that up until this point, he has only been healed through the requests of the nobility. She continues her thought, asking if healing Beatty was something done of Arthur's own volition. He quietly affirms her question. The two of them stand in the quiet aftermath of the event. Kay turns her gaze back toward the other orphans, a thoughtful look on her face. She wonders aloud if this is the same feeling she had when she was healed. Her words catch his attention, and he asks her to describe that feeling. In response, Kay simply turns to him with a gentle smile. She doesn't answer directly, instead stating with newfound resolve that she will study from now on. Mordred seems to quietly accept her answer. Their conversation is interrupted by Arthur, who leans in to remind them both that the fact he performed a healing is a secret. Kay responds with a cheerful, enthusiastic yes. He wanders outside the large estate under the night sky, a lantern in hand. Sleep will not come to him. His mind is too troubled by the day's events. His thoughts drift to a book detailing the names of those from the orphanage who opposed the execution. He recalls Morgan's pointed question. Did he truly change the boy's fate? A separate thought intrudes. His own note still hasn't been updated to reflect his new sentence. He continues walking, the book still in hand, pondering the absurdity of a prince sleeping by the roadside. Suddenly, a figure materializes before him in the moonlight. He looks up, his breath catching as he recognizes her. Morgan. She looks down at him, explaining that because Kay is kind, she wanted to ask him directly. Can he change fate? He admits that he knows nothing of fate, a concept she seems to dismiss with a wave of her hand. Her gaze sharpens. She declares that he has changed, and that this is not a guess, but an observation she has made from watching him closely for a very long time. The intense confrontation shatters as Arthur jolts awake. It's the next morning. In a panic, he grabs a journal and scribbles a new entry. Was put on guard by Mordred's faction. He stares at the words, frantically wondering why this is happening and if anything has truly changed. Rain falls steadily, creating ripples in the puddles outside a large estate. Inside, a young maid pounds frantically on a heavy wooden door, her face a mask of desperation as she calls out for Arthur. Her pleas echo against the unmoving door. She shouts that it has already been 3 days. Behind that door, Arthur sits huddled under a blanket, engrossed in a book. He looks weary, thinking to himself that if things continue this way, a revolution will occur. He resolves that he doesn't want to go outside again. Suddenly, a small, doll-like creature is tossed into the room, landing with a soft thud as a declaration is made. He looks up from his book, startled by the intrusion. The maid, Kay, stands in the now-open doorway, her expression firm. She announces that she has come to consult with him, questioning if he truly cannot avoid his own execution. Arthur glares at her, clearly annoyed. Kay suggests a change of scenery to lift his spirits, but he snaps back that this is no joke. He demands to know what he's supposed to do when his execution and Mordred are brought up together. His agitation boils over. He leaps to his feet, telling her to wait. A sudden realization dawns on him, connecting Mordred to avoiding his execution, the one that will happen in this world 5 years from now. He declares it a reversal of his previous thinking and shouts for her to call Mordred at once. With his decision made, a confident smirk spreads across his face as he stretches. He muses that this was a blind spot. Though he has tried many things, he now believes this new approach, a direct confrontation with Mordred, might be the quickest path to success. He turns his gaze toward the door, waiting. Outside, Kay holds a small doll and calls out into the hall, summoning Mordred to enter. He watched as his younger brother, the third Prince Mordred Pendragon, entered the room with a cheerful greeting. But as Arthur looked upon him, a single, cold thought echoed in his mind. This was the man who had executed him in his previous life. The younger prince slid the door open, remarking with surprise that he found Arthur's previous sulking more interesting. With a playful smile, he likened his brother's current state to that of castaway. From within his cell, Arthur retorted angrily, telling him not to say such frightening things. Mordred simply chuckled, reminding him that as the future leader of a revolution in 5 years, he couldn't afford to be careless. He smiled, observing that Arthur had the face of someone about to start a revolution. Just then, the maid Kay appeared, politely offering to bring tea. Arthur, looking away, declined and simply told her to take a seat. The maid was taken aback, wondering why her master was suddenly calling her by name. Arthur confirmed that he was, indeed, doing so. This sent Mordred into a fit of delight, exclaiming how wonderful it was that his brother was finally paying attention to the problem of class disparity. His brother leaned against a pillar, recalling Arthur's previous support for an orphanage and thinking to himself how cute he was. Arthur, meanwhile, looked down at his book with a new sense of awe, realizing that if his brother was truly this kind, he might just be able to avoid his execution after all. He then stated plainly that he had always felt he was simply being used by the nobility. The words struck Arthur, whose expression immediately fell into shock. He elaborated, explaining that Arthur's healing ability was monopolized by the aristocracy, a privilege that couldn't be stopped. He pointed out the futility of Arthur's charity, stating that the orphans who received his support would never find decent work anyway. Stunned by this cynical outburst, Arthur could only stammer in disbelief as Mordred coolly told him to do his best. He leaned in close to his tearful brother, asking if he was relieved. With a chilling intensity, Mordred promised that he would be the one to change everything. Alone once more, Arthur scrambled in his bed, shouting into the empty room for Mordred to come out. Overwhelmed and confused, he cried out, demanding to know what he was supposed to do now. Outside the door, Kay listened to the prince's cries. She resolved to cure him immediately before he fell ill from the stress. Yet, she mused that the ways of the nobility were unlikely to change. More than anything, she simply wanted to understand the reason behind his strange behavior. She knew that simply telling him what to do would be useless. With his healing ability monopolized by the nobility, Arthur was trapped, and words alone wouldn't free him. Therefore, she took decisive action. With a determined shout, she shoved Arthur's wheelchair forward at a reckless speed, declaring that there was something he absolutely had to do. He was completely bewildered until she cheerfully announced her plan. Sunbathing. She then immediately muttered that this wasn't quite right. She produced a parasol, explaining it was for the imported rain, and forbade him from going outside on his own. Spotting his notebook, she tried to take it, warning him not to drop it and forbidding him from touching it. He clutched the book, snapping that it was none of her business. Kay noted his serious expression and asked what was inside. He admitted he was writing down frightening things, causing Kay to wonder aloud if she was of any use to him at all. Her crestfallen look made him anxious, and he demanded to know why she looked so sad. From under the parasol, Kay's eyes shone with an unnerving intensity. She declared that she would strive to earn his praise, reminding him she had already taken him outside as instructed and asking what more he could possibly want. Before he could process her words, she snatched the notebook directly from his hands. He reached out, stunned by her sudden move. He exploded with rage, shouting her name. He couldn't believe her audacity, yet at the same time, he questioned why she seemed so angry with him. She declared that she was fine with him being a shut-in, but that she was angry because he was trying to solve everything by himself. She ordered him to return to his room at once, leaving Arthur utterly baffled. He clutched a small doll she had handed him, protesting that her logic made no sense and that this was his own problem. Kneeling before him, Kay insisted he was wrong. She pleaded that she couldn't understand unless he explained himself, asking him what it was he truly wanted to say. She admits through tears that she has no education and cannot offer proper advice. Still, kneeling before him, she insists that she understands his reliance on her is not what he wants, but she cannot simply stand by. He looks down, telling her not to look at him with such a pained expression. From a distance, as he questions her sentiment, she confirms that his current state is indeed strange. She elaborates, stating that he is always trying to bear his burdens alone. She acknowledges that his troubles are far greater than anything she could imagine, but declares that it is her purpose to support him as he faces these challenges with such noble resolve. With her head bowed, she confesses her simple wish, that he would not have to suffer or be sad. The plea stuns Arthur, who calls out her name, protesting that such a thing is impossible. She quietly concedes his point, agreeing that her wish is indeed unattainable. But despite this, she looks up with renewed determination, declaring that she will pray for his happiness anyway. She then asks if her outburst surprised him. He turns away, and she admits that she was surprised by her own actions as well, explaining that this surprise is what fueled her anger. He turns back sharply, his gaze piercing. He demands to know why she would get angry or cry over his affairs, admitting he doesn't understand. He then asks her to explain it to him. Tears well in her eyes once more, but this time they are tears of relief. She understands that by asking her to explain, he has finally, truly relied on her. Standing together on the balcony under a clearing sky, she explains that it is not just her. Morgan and all the other maids share the same desire, to be his strength. Her words trigger a memory within Arthur, transporting him back to a windswept day from his childhood. He sees himself as a young boy, kneeling before young Kay. He recalls the moment of understanding, the quiet realization of what had occurred. His younger self apologizes to Kay, his head bowed. He thinks with regret that he had known the truth all along. The memory fades, dissolving into an image of a sunlit field of roses. Back in the present, Morgan interrupts his thoughts, suggesting he prepare tea, and that Kay should also take a seat. Arthur agrees. Morgan then insists that while she can't force him, he should at least consult with her. Arthur looks away, admitting that he would be sad if Kay came to hate him, which causes Morgan to blush. She puffs out her chest with determination, declaring that she is the one who should be relied upon as a maid. Arthur watches her outburst, slightly bewildered. Her declaration is followed by a triumphant smile as she announces she has prepared new sweets for him. She runs ahead, holding up a small doll as if to emphasize her point. The sweets are revealed to be delicate, rose-shaped pastries. Morgan explains that she was tempted by them and even received some from Marianu, wondering what he must think of her now. In a tiled room, Morgan is already enjoying a pastry. She urges Arthur to eat, saying he must be hungry for being outside. As Kay holds the tray and asks if this is where they'll be eating, Arthur takes a bite. The taste is immediate and overwhelming. Both Arthur and Morgan recoil in shock, tears streaming down their faces as they cry out from the intense spiciness. He gasps for air, still reeling from the intense spice. Beside him, Kay is similarly incapacitated on the ground. Through his labored breaths, he identifies the pastry as a souvenir from the Holy Land. He questions what kind of flavor this could possibly be for a saint. Kay, struggling just as much, clarifies that her healing abilities have no bearing on her sense of taste. She explains that the pastry was an attempt to perfectly replicate the saint's favorite flavor. Her words trigger a sudden, shocking realization for Arthur. The pieces click into place, and with newfound clarity, he shouts her name, startling her. That's it, Kay. He looks at her with intense determination, declaring that starting the next day, she will be able to go outside. Kay stares back, completely bewildered by his sudden proclamation. Without waiting for a response, he grabs her hand and pulls her into a run. He announces his plan. They will go abroad to meet the saint. As they dash away, he tells her that once he's decided something, he acts immediately, asking her to lend him her strength and consult with him. In the darkness, a soft voice calls out a single name, Arthur. The maid accompanying him explains the purpose of their journey. She states that with the country's situation worsening, they are regarded with suspicion. Her goal, she reveals, is to win the holy capital to their side, and for that, she needs his help. Holding a large, serrated blade, Arthur asks if that is truly her intention. As they arrive at their destination, Arthur gazes out from a balcony overlooking a vast coastal city. He exclaims with excitement that this is the holy capital, Glastonbury, the land where the saintess resides. The maid watches him, a faint smile on her lips. She points to the bustling streets below, remarking that it is a nation where many different races coexist, unlike their own homeland. Arthur agrees, noting that while he himself is an elf, there is a reason for the stark difference between the two lands. He continues his thought, explaining that he'd investigated the saintess's power and believed that demonstrating his own strength would be enough to win her over as an ally. Now, however, he realizes it won't be so simple. Hearing his concerns, the maid's expression softens, and she offers to teach him what he needs to know. Suddenly, the system doll appears, presenting a formal lesson. It explains that the holy capital, Glastonbury, is an autonomous territory governed by the church. It serves as a mediator whenever conflicts arise between the surrounding nations. The doll then pivots, startling Arthur with a direct question. Why does he possess such immense power? Before he can formulate a response, it answers its own query. The reason is the existence of the saintess, a being with formidable healing abilities who is dispatched to other nations to conduct healing activities. An ethereal image of the saintess manifests, conveying her immense presence. Arthur mulls this over, understanding that this must be the reason he was assigned a dedicated maid he could rely on. As he thinks, a hand gently pats the system doll's head. A smiling man with long, dark hair appears behind them, calling out a name, Tristan. The man apologizes for his tardiness, introducing himself as Tristan, a knight of the Kingdom of Britain. He gestures to a noble woman beside him, commenting on how adorable Kay's preparations were. The maid with Arthur agrees that Kay is cute, but notes that Arthur is different. Tristan then turns to a bewildered Arthur and clarifies that he is his assigned escort knight. He listens as the saintess explains the situation. She assures him that if their dinner is successful, his anxieties will be resolved, as it will mark the day the holy capital forges a friendship with the Kingdom of Britain. This declaration does little to soothe him. He perceives that beneath the surface, the public order is deteriorating into an unstable situation. As Arthur contemplates this, Tristan watches, sensing that the flames of destiny are drawing perilously close to the young prince. He erupts, shouting that an alliance with the holy capital would be a powerful asset in times of crisis. With fierce determination, he proclaims that this is a pivotal day, one for which he has risked his very life. With his resolve stated, he stands firm on the balcony, ready to face what comes next. He turns his attention to the saintess, a competitive fire igniting in his eyes. He realizes he must absolutely defeat her, seeing her now as a rival. His competitive spirit is met in kind. The saintess, with a cheerful smile, declares that she will absolutely defeat him, echoing his own thoughts. Momentarily surprised, he listens as she changes the subject, asking if he is ready for their dinner. Before the formal meal, they pause for a local delicacy. The saintess notes that while they just had some grilled bird skewers, this particular kind, the gokoma bird, is a famous specialty of the country. Tristan cheerfully adds that he and his companions were also treated to some. The saintess takes a bite, only to find the flavor overwhelmingly spicy. Puffing her cheeks in displeasure, she declares that if this is representative of the local cuisine, it will be a problem. Meanwhile, Arthur eats his portion without any trouble as other maids watch from a distance. As he eats, a memory surfaces. He realizes with a start that he has eaten this before, though he had forgotten. The taste triggers a distinct recollection of having a meal with the saintess in a previous life. The memory solidifies into a clear vision. He and the saintess, seated at opposite ends of a long, formal dining table, alone in a vast, dark space. He recalls a time when nothing was born, a quiet moment before everything changed. After the revolution, the saintess's neutrality was decided. But the memory is tainted by a sudden, sharp agony. The first time he had ever experienced such pain. The pain brought him to his knees, desperately calling for someone who could use healing magic, begging them to summon the saintess. A man with a familiar face coldly told him to call her himself. The thought filled him with shame. He had fallen so far as to rely on the saintess of another nation. This memory of past failure fuels his present resolve. As a younger boy, he had stood before a door, determined that this time, he would succeed and prove himself. His determination led him to this very moment, an audience in the holy city. A formal voice announced the presence of the one known there as the saintess, introducing her by the name Elaine. The announcement hangs in the air, causing a stir among the maids watching from a nearby doorway. Their faces a mixture of shock and concern. Their surprise is directed at the scene unfolding before them. The saintess, her face still concealed by a fan, playfully asks if he is shy and if the food she offered is to his liking. Arthur, caught off guard, swallows nervously. He composes himself, addressing her directly by her title and name, Saintess Elaine. A memory surfaces. In his past life, she had shown her face without any hesitation. Her response is cheerful, though her face remains hidden. With a smile in her voice, she suggests they get along well, as they are both users of the same healing magic. Her casual proposition only serves to fluster him further. One of the maids chides him for his rude words, but Arthur is preoccupied, realizing he cannot get her to lower the fan. He offers a quick apology for his forwardness, but then declares that he will not let her disrupt his plans. In response to his declaration, the saintess makes a startling move. Lowering her fan, she reveals not her face, but an ornate, unsettling mask. She claims to know his face and states that she has no reason to listen to his instructions because her healing ability is superior. With unnerving intensity, she demands that he remove his own mask. She cries out that it's no use, comparing her powerful healing ability to the constant pain of being struck by a nail. As she expresses her anguish, Arthur declares from the side that he possesses the same power. Her outburst culminates in her collapsing from her chair. The head maid, Marianu, immediately apologizes to Arthur for the scene, insisting they meant no ill will, as Kay and another maid begin to weep. The maids cry out for Elaine as she lies on the floor. A calm, elven woman wearing a blindfold observes the chaos. One maid whispers that this Elaine seems different from usual, provoking a furious reaction from Kay, who demands how she could speak of royalty in such a way. The elven woman addresses the maids directly, asking what they're so dissatisfied about when healing magic is being dispatched where it is needed. She asserts that she has been treating them properly and asks them to speak with her, but Kay shouts back that she already understands all of that. Kay's frustration boils over as she explains she wants to be useful, but the elven woman refuses to even speak with her. Arthur seizes the opportunity to interject, boldly claiming he is superior and demanding they form a diplomatic relationship, a proposal the elven healer immediately rejects. The tense argument is abruptly shattered when a knight bursts through the doors, shouting an apology for interrupting their meeting. He urgently explains the reason for his intrusion. A monster has appeared in a neighboring village, and all the inhabitants have been poisoned. Holding an unconscious woman, he stresses the gravity of the emergency, with other victims visible on the ground behind him. The elven healer calmly acknowledges the report. She examines the knight, noting that the poison is potent enough to kill even a trained warrior. With a quiet declaration, she places her hands on his head to begin healing. A brilliant light erupts from her hands, enveloping the poisoned knight in a powerful wave of restorative energy. Arthur can only watch, his expression one of pure shock at the immense display of healing magic. The light fades, leaving the knight unconscious but stable. The elven healer declares him fine and suggests he be taken to rest. Spurred to action, Arthur orders a carriage to be prepared for the village, but the healer turns to him with a regretful look, stopping him. She suddenly falters, a wave of weakness washing over her as she stumbles forward. From the doorway behind her, Arthur watches in shock, calling out her name in alarm. As she struggles, a dark-haired attendant rushes to her side, urging her to hurry. The attendant insists that this is no time for such delays, reminding her that Saintess Elaine's dinner party is scheduled to begin. The elven healer's focus sharpens, her resolve hardening. She identifies the affliction as a troublesome poison and makes a solemn vow to the attendant that she will absolutely save everyone. Before she can act on her vow, a blur of motion streaks past. A young boy with a confident smile pulls a girl along with him, rushing ahead with surprising speed, leaving the elven healer staring in astonishment. In a ravaged village, bodies lie strewn across the ground, afflicted by a gruesome sickness. From a nearby vantage point, an observer notes that it would have been better if the saintess had arrived sooner, remarking on the horrific scene. Into this devastation walks Arthur. A surviving villager asks who he is, lamenting that a demon's poison has taken most of the village. Another, older man frantically warns him not to approach, shouting that it's dangerous. Arthur simply looks at them and states with calm certainty that he has come to heal them. As he speaks, the Saintess, Elaine, arrives at a run. The old man cries out her name in relief, telling her she has come to treat them and asking where the injured are. Her attention, however, is immediately captured by the sight of the boy who arrived moments before her. Without warning, Arthur rushes past her, carrying an afflicted person. He calls out for Prince Arthur, then catches himself, panting that he was too late as he addresses Elaine directly. He turns to face her amidst the fallen villagers, declaring that while she treats the people, he will save everyone first. His resolve is absolute. Elaine stares in disbelief, questioning what he thinks he is doing. She recognizes the nature of the affliction, realizing with alarm just how potent this poison is. Moments later, Arthur kneels beside a poisoned man. The man looks up at him, weak but grateful, thanking Arthur Sama and saying he feels much better. His relief is fleeting. The man suddenly convulses, his hand flying to his face as his condition rapidly worsens. From a distance, Elaine watches in horror, realizing that the very spot she had previously treated has become reinfected. The terrible truth dawns on her. The poison is airborne. She explains that her own healing ability allows her to enter the contaminated space, but anyone else will be infected simply by being present. She throws her arms out wide, shouting at Arthur that his efforts are futile and he cannot heal the villagers this way. He responds with unnerving calm, stating that he, however, is fine. Ignoring his words, the Saintess Elaine unleashes a brilliant flash of power. She declares her intention to cast a healing spell over the entire area, bathing the small hut and its surroundings in a radiant light. He urges her to heal the afflicted quickly. With a confident grin, she tells him to leave it to her. Outside the hut, the elven healer and an elderly villager wait with bated breath, concerned for Arthur's safety and wondering about the commotion within. Suddenly, a powerful force erupts from the hut, sending Arthur flying backward with a startled cry. He lands outside where the elven healer stands over him and a now-recovered Saintess. Noting that morning has arrived, she remarks that he must be exhausted. In the background, the once-afflicted villagers are now healthy and active. The Saintess, now fully recovered, looks at her own hands in amazement. She muses that her healing magic might now be as potent as the elven healers, but quickly dismisses the thought as competitive. The only thing that matters, she concludes with relief, is that the villagers have been cured. The elven healer quietly affirms her words. Elaine's focus then shifts to Arthur, still sitting on the ground, and she questions why he is present. As she speaks, a wave of exhaustion hits her. She stumbles, clutching her head, and explains that her body is refusing to move. The strain of using such powerful healing magic on so many people at once, a feat she is unaccustomed to, has left her utterly depleted. The elven healer watches, dryly observing that she has now become a liability. The elderly villager, overwhelmed, points out that they have been graced by both the Saintess and foreign royalty. He throws himself to the ground, insisting their poor village has nothing to offer as thanks. Arthur cuts him off, stating plainly that he has stopped taking money for his healing. The declaration catches the exhausted Saintess by surprise. His statement is interrupted by the cheerful arrival of Tristan. The knight strides forward and playfully grabs Arthur by the collar, chiding him for being a troublesome master. He laments with a grin that he never expected his duties to include being a bodyguard. Admitting the whole affair gave him quite a fright. Arthur offers a quiet apology. Tristan's expression softens as he tells him not to worry, so long as he is unharmed. He gently reminds Arthur to be more considerate of those who care for his well-being. Arthur, resting inside a stable, looks up with a questioning gaze. Outside, a lone horse stands under a sky where soft flakes begin to fall. From their position below, he, Tristan, and an elderly villager peer up through the wooden planks of a loft, listening intently. Above them, Tristan speaks to the elven healer, noting her exhaustion and suggesting she rest. The healer agrees, instructing him to make preparations for their departure as soon as the horse has recovered. His attention then shifts to the saintess, who is being supported by an attendant. Arthur observes that the poison they encountered was unusually strong, something he had never seen before. The elven healer elaborates on the danger, explaining that the poison is infectious through mere proximity. She reveals its terrifying origin. It is the work of a cockatrice, one of the 5 great calamities. Tristan, his hand to his forehead in concern, confirms her words are true. He mentions that foul rumors have been spreading and concludes that their only option is to establish a perimeter to contain the threat. The revelation weighs heavily on Arthur. He realizes with dread that such a powerful monster dwelling in the swamp could destroy the entire town with just one beast, and the spreading poison would ruin their trade. As a scaled, reptilian tail whips past, the elven healer asks if they are familiar with a creature that has the head of a chicken and the tail of a snake. Arthur immediately recognizes the description, calling it a newt lizard. Hearing this, Tristan's fighting spirit ignites, and he declares he will exterminate it, asking for Arthur's help. Before the assembled villagers, Arthur confidently asks if Tristan has ever fought a monster, then cheerfully admits that he himself is completely inexperienced. His startling admission makes Kay flush with worry. Arthur turns to her, reassuring her that it will be fine since it's just a newt lizard. His confident expression then softens as he looks at her and adds, but he sits with Kay, noticing her downcast expression. He asks if she's worried about him, remarking that he's the one who should be afraid, but then softly adds that he understands her concern. His moment with Kay is interrupted by Tristan, who places a reassuring hand on his shoulder. Tristan tells him not to worry, as he will be there with him. Arthur looks up, his spirits lifted, as Tristan prompts him to speak up. Before he can respond, a hand shoots out to interrupt their conversation. The elven healer, flustered, apologizes for her forwardness, struggling to find the words to explain what she means. She then stands resolute, her voice firm. She declares that they do not require assistance, insisting that the problems of her country are hers to solve alone. Both Arthur and Kay watch her, taken aback by her sudden declaration. As the elven healer is blasted backward by an unseen force, Tristan cries out her name in alarm. Elaine. Arthur watches, his expression hardening with a painful memory. This scene is all too familiar. It is the story he has always been told, the sorrowful tale of the elven saintess and Arthur himself. He murmurs an apology, his voice filled with regret. The Elaine he once knew, he reflects, was never like this. From a distance, Mordred observes his brother's troubled state. The memory transports him back 4 years. A young, pure-hearted elven girl, Elaine, had just arrived at the church. She was filled with hope, eager to awaken the healing magic that lay dormant within her. She had been captivated by the legend of the Holy King, a famed healing magic user from the Kingdom of Britain. Deeply admiring this hero from fairy tales, she dreamed of becoming like him, a healer who would tend to anyone, regardless of their station in life. But reality proved to be a cruel disappointment. The church had no interest in her ideals. They treated the saintess as a mere symbol, a tool to enhance their own authority. The weight of this truth left her crushed. Despite her disillusionment, she performed her duties. After healing a small child, the mother offered heartfelt thanks. However, another healer commented that Elaine was simply doing what was expected of a saintess, adding that her actions would surely elevate the church's reputation. The young child she healed cheerfully told her to keep up the good work, but Elaine could only force a strained smile. As she walked away, she heard her colleagues whispering that she didn't get along with them. One called out, feigning concern, remarking on how tired she must be. Soon after, news arrived that an epidemic had broken out in the slums. The group of healers, including Elaine, resolved to go together to offer their aid. While preparing, Elaine overheard 2 of her colleagues speaking with disturbing cheer. One suggested that it would be better if the number of infected people increased, as it would be a prime opportunity to showcase their magic. Horrified, Elaine turned to them, demanding to know what they were saying. Their smiling faces confirmed her worst fears. The memory shows her standing alone, isolated by their cynicism. Arthur's recollection concludes with a somber thought. It was then that Elaine stopped doing what was expected of her. He recalled her despair. She believed there was no one in the world with the sublime healing touch of the Holy King, and that she herself could never achieve such a thing. This realization led her to a grim decision, to act as a counterfeit, a hollow imitation, so that she would never again hold any hope for the world. The memory shifted. Tristan listened to an explanation, remarking on the situation as maids bowed and apologized for their rudeness. Arthur, however, seemed to dismiss their formality. His focus was entirely on Elaine. He spoke her name, acknowledging how unsettling it must be for her to have no one she could truly trust. She turned away into the shadows, lost in thought, until his voice called out her name again. She quickly dismissed his concern, claiming it was nothing. Then, a memory of a brighter day surfaced. Arthur, full of youthful energy, announced a cockatrice hunt to a group of eager children, promising them a feast. He called out to Kay, then turned to Elaine, telling her to look forward to their return. Her face flushed with a mixture of surprise and happiness, and she managed a simple, heartfelt agreement. Out in the woods, the hunt was underway. As they walked, Arthur asked what exactly they were searching for. Tristan explained with a knowing smile that creatures like the cockatrice often leave behind traces of their prey. Suddenly, a grotesque, chicken-like beast burst from the undergrowth, sending Arthur stumbling backward in shock. He cried out that it was some kind of bizarre monster. Tristan, however, remained perfectly calm, chiding Arthur for his recklessness and telling him to provide protection. As Arthur fumbled with a piece of cloth, he shouted at Tristan not to discard it. He stared down at the tattered, blood-stained fabric clutched in his hand. His eyes widened in shock as the realization of what it was began to dawn. The horrifying truth struck him. This is her veil, he realized, his gaze darting from the discarded cloth on the ground. An image of Elaine's worried expression flashed in his mind, a stark premonition of the danger she was in. Panic seized him, and he broke into a desperate sprint alongside Tristan. "Elaine!" he screamed, his voice cracking with terror. Ahead, they found her, sprawled motionless on the forest floor, her clothes torn. Something terrible had happened to the saintess. In the aftermath of an attack, the elven healer, Elaine, lies unconscious on the forest floor. Arthur, kneeling nearby, recognizes the signs of the assault instantly. This was, without a doubt, the work of a cockatrice. The sight of her injuries sends a jolt through Mordred. He clutches his chest, a wave of anger and confusion washing over him as he wonders why this had to happen. The feeling intensifies into a sharp, unbearable pain in his heart. He cries out in anguish, desperate for someone to save her quickly. Nearby, another companion confirms that Elaine has only fainted. Just then, Tristan arrives. He looks down at the still unconscious Elaine, remarking that she, the saintess, had been attempting to seal the cockatrice by herself. He advises that they should leave the task to his group and return to the village. But she rises, her resolve firm. Gripping her weapon, Elaine rejects his offer, stating she will go alone. Mordred immediately protests, insisting that he will be the one to capture the beast, while another elven companion asks for permission to join the saintess. As she walks away, Mordred turns to his brother, asking if he has ever seen a real cockatrice, admitting he has only ever seen demonic replicas. Arthur curtly tells him to be quiet. Her patience worn thin by the chatter, Elaine glances back over her shoulder, her voice sharp as she commands them to be silent. Tristan leans in and playfully warns Mordred that speaking of the cockatrice might summon it. He then smiles, observing that it's quite rare for the young prince to show such concern for another person. Flustered by the observation, Mordred demands to know what he means, insisting that he can't simply leave Saintess Elaine to fend for herself. Tristan's grin widens as he pins Mordred with his foot, playfully asking if this feeling could be love. The suggestion earns disgusted looks from both Arthur and Elaine. The knight's words strike a chord. Mordred pulls away, lost in thought. He questions why he feels this way, admitting to himself that he finds the woman irritating and shouldn't want to help her, particularly since she is a capable healer herself. A realization begins to dawn on him. He explained to the solemn elven healer that he, too, had once read picture books about the Holy King. His words were cut short as Elaine suddenly grabbed his face, her masked expression intense. She asked if he was surprised, then pointed to a small cut on his cheek and questioned if it hurt. The moment brought a memory to the surface. His brother, Arthur, once remarking on a girl who chattered on about him. Mordred, however, internally dismissed the thought, convinced he didn't believe any of it. He recalled his brother's sentiment that if one gives up, one might become like the Holy King, capable of believing in people. As the memory faded, his attention returned to Elaine, who observed that he still hadn't given up on saving people. She concluded that he must truly want to be like the Holy King now. She turned back, declaring that she understood he was pitying her and would grant him a favor as a result. Tristan quickly interjected, telling Mordred that what he felt wasn't pity, but something else entirely. As Mordred processed this, Elaine announced she would go on ahead. Tristan called out to her as she departed, addressing her as Lady Elaine. He reminded her that she was a proud saintess and urged her to return home. Her response was sharp and defiant. Now clad in simpler garments, she retorted that she would not stand by and watch a foreigner be sacrificed for the sake of diplomacy. She declared she was done with such matters, leaving both Mordred and Tristan stunned. Before anyone could react to her outburst, a massive, monstrous creature with the body of a rooster and the tail of a serpent descended upon them with a screech, its talons poised to strike. The beast landed heavily, revealing its full, terrifying form. Mordred stared in disbelief, realizing this was the cockatrice and remarking that it was much larger than he had imagined. Beside him, Elaine stood firm, her weapon drawn. He stares in disbelief, asking Tristan what their plan is. He realizes with a jolt of panic that they can't possibly fight in such a confined space. In response, Tristan agrees and declares they must move to a more open area, immediately breaking into a run. Elaine protests, telling him not to make decisions for them. But he dismisses her complaint, insisting they must engage the beast where there is more room to maneuver. As they flee through the woods, their escape is cut short. Mordred cries out in alarm. They've run into a dead end. The cockatrice takes to the air, soaring over their heads and landing with a thud, effectively trapping them. Crouching low, Tristan identifies the creature as a large, poisonous bird, while Mordred observes with fear that it simply flew past them. The sound of splashing water interrupts them. Elaine realizes its true intent. The cockatrice has landed in the nearby stream, turning all the surrounding water into poison. The creature stands amidst the corrupted, steaming water, creating the most dire of situations. In response, Tristan draws his bow, taking careful aim at the beast. He lets the arrow fly, but it disintegrates in a black vapor just before impact. He grimaces, realizing it's no use. The poison in the air rotted the shaft mid-flight. With his ranged attack nullified, Elaine steps forward. She addresses Mordred as Arthur, explaining that the creature is cowardly by nature and is trying to provoke them, which means this will be a protracted fight. Declaring that this is her domain, she takes a resolute step forward, vowing to protect his country herself. As Elaine watches, Mordred suddenly charges forward, calling out to her as Arthur Summa. The cockatrice is taken aback, perplexed that a human would willingly step into its poisonous domain. He moves with astonishing speed. The poison begins to seep into his leg, but is instantly purified and vanishes. To the demonic creature, he is an impossible being, one that should not exist. The creature is baffled. For a cockatrice, its poison is its very lifeblood. If that can be purified, then it is no more than a powerless chicken. Before it can react, Mordred seizes the monster, his compatibility with its nature proving to be a perfect counter. He cheerfully announces that he's caught the cockatrice. From the shore, Elaine remarks on the wonderful sight and instructs Tristan to continue the purification, but he can only defer to her. She notes that while the cockatrice has weakened, it will continue to be supplied with energy as long as the surrounding poison remains. Tristan voices his concern, seeing that Mordred's hands are tiring. He remains confident, however, that the cockatrice will be the first to exhaust its strength. Despite his assessment, Elaine decides she must act. Calling out to Arthur, she announces that she will provide aid. Her determination is bolstered by the memory of his vow not to abandon people and his desire to become like the Holy King. With this purpose clear in her mind, she extends her hands and unleashes a brilliant aura of power. Both Mordred and Tristan look on in shock, realizing she intends to purify the entire poison spring. As her purifying energy surges through the water, the cockatrice lets out a piercing shriek, held fast in Mordred's grip. He holds the struggling cockatrice, its power clearly diminished by the purification. Looking back at the elven healer standing on the now clear water, he shouts his gratitude, exclaiming that her magic is working. But the beast is not yet defeated. With a final, desperate surge of strength, the cockatrice thrashes wildly, flinging Elaine into the air with a startled cry. Tristan watches from a short distance, a hand to his chin in thought. He observes that the venom has transformed into pure water. Nearby, Elaine trembles, weakened by the ordeal. A memory surfaces in Elaine's mind. A much younger Arthur runs toward her, joyfully thanking her. At that moment, she had believed it was because she had received his help, but the memory twists into a nightmare. The young boy suddenly lunges, thrusting a strange, star-shaped object toward her neck. Her eyes fly open in sheer, unadulterated shock as it makes contact. The force of that memory strikes Arthur in the present. He gasps, his own eyes wide with horror, reflecting the spectral image of a guillotine. From afar, Tristan realizes that this memory is too much even for Elaine to bear. Overwhelmed, Elaine cries out, questioning what is happening. The painful memory is compounded by another, Morgan Le Fay coldly reminding her that as a servant, she is only to say pleasant things. Her anguish spilling into the present, she turns on Arthur, her voice trembling with rage and hurt. "What could you possibly know about me?" she demands. Tristan watches the confrontation escalate, noting Elaine's growing agitation. He silently concludes that it would be best not to provoke her any further. Arthur, however, remains calm in the face of her outburst. After a brief silence, he looks directly at her and says with quiet certainty, "I know." He then calls her name, Elaine Sama. He repeats his words with powerful conviction. "I know." As he speaks, a force seems to emanate from him, causing Elaine to flinch as if physically struck. Arthur pleads with her to stop. As he and Elaine walk away together, a realization dawns on her. She looks at her hand, then at him, understanding that he is the one who can heal her. Tristan watches them go, utterly stunned. With his head bowed, Arthur's voice trembled as he pleaded with her to see him as pitiful and to listen to what he had to say. He looked up, his expression desperate, insisting that he wasn't spoiled. He claimed that she was just like him, recalling his own past abandonment and confessing his fear that if things continued this way, he would be left all alone with no one to save him. She stood over him, defiant, retorting that she could still manage on her own. She warned him not to speak, as if he knew her, declaring that she had never needed to borrow anyone's help to get by. Suddenly, the monstrous cockatrice dove from the sky, its wings beating fiercely as it descended upon Arthur. Her eyes wide with alarm, Elaine screamed for him to get out of the way. Her bravado shattered in an instant. Tears streamed down her face as she admitted to herself that she needed someone's help because a dark, beastly shadow loomed before her. His own tears fell as he confessed his deepest fear. He explained that while he could heal from any injury almost instantly, the pain of having no allies, of being utterly alone, was what was truly frightening and agonizing. His words struck a chord deep within her. Overwhelmed by a shared sense of desolation, she clutched her head and wept, finally whispering that she understood. Just then, a new figure appeared. Tristan, a knight of the kingdom, stood smiling over the now-defeated cockatrice. He casually remarked that he seemed to have intruded upon their moment. And so, with the cockatrice slain, the village's great worry was finally resolved. The townsfolk gathered, relieved, while Elaine stood amongst them, her head bowed in thought. A young villager wearing a beret approached her, their expression gentle as they began to speak. She smiles reassuringly at the villager, who looks on with a puzzled expression. Nearby, Arthur, with a flustered face, exclaims how worried he was. Morgan echoes his concern, asking Tristan if he's hurt. The knight, however, simply laughs it off, pointing out that his clothes are in tatters, but he is otherwise unharmed, as only his garments were dissolved by the poison. With the saintess's troubles resolved and diplomatic relations normalized, the subjugation of the 5 great demonic beasts is declared complete upon the defeat of the cockatrice. As a result of this victory, Prince Arthur has acquired a total of 20 points. Because many people, led by the saintess herself, opposed his execution, his sentence has been officially commuted to life imprisonment. While Arthur and Morgan enjoy a snack, Elaine rushes towards them with an intense expression, startling them both as she declares that they must begin corresponding. She reminds them that she promised to establish diplomatic relations, and as part of that, she will listen to their troubles and offer them a reward. She presents a spicy grilled skewer as a first offering, and after a moment's hesitation, Morgan accepts on their behalf. Nearby, Tristan waves from his departing carriage, thanking Arthur and crediting him with the successful completion of his mission. As he rides away, he calls out for Arthur to inform him of any progress with the saintess and Kay, leaving Arthur to wonder at his parting words. Just then, Mordred appears with a knowing smile, remarking that the flavor has increased again. He consults a book, confirming that Arthur has avoided execution and received a life sentence instead. He then proclaims that while the fate of death cannot be escaped, fate itself can be changed. His cryptic words are lost as a crowd of townsfolk suddenly surrounds them, cheering for Arthur, the hero who defeated the cockatrice. From the throng, a reporter named Jean pushes forward, eagerly asking for an interview on behalf of the subjugated guards. Before Arthur can respond, Morgan steps between them, protectively waving the reporter away. Undeterred, he holds up a newspaper, urging them to pay attention to a particular story. The article details the upcoming public execution of a criminal, showing the haggard face of a man Arthur seems to recognize. The reporter then reveals the man's identity. He is the very person who attacked Arthur on his way to the orphanage. The revelation leaves both Arthur and Morgan stunned. He reeled from the news, remembering the incident with his attacker. The reporter, Jean, confirmed his fears, stating that the public execution was scheduled for the following week. Elsewhere, Mordred's expression hardened with resolve. He declared his intention to attend the execution, anticipating that a large crowd would surely gather to watch. He considered the man who had tried to kill him. While acknowledging the man was a criminal, a sudden, brilliant idea brought a sly smile to his face. He lunged towards the reporter, exclaiming that this was a perfect opportunity to acquire a massive amount of good deed points. Moments later, at the public square, Mordred stood before the assembled crowd and the condemned prisoner. He announced loudly that he forgave the man for the assault and was canceling the public execution, leaving the reporter utterly dumbfounded. The reporter and a nearby maid were speechless. The reporter stammered, questioning how Mordred could forgive a criminal, his confusion palpable as a bird took flight nearby. Mordred explained his reasoning with conviction. He knew that the common folk were not like the avarice-driven nobles. They were simply human beings, each with their own struggles. He understood that the man had acted not out of malice, but out of a desperate, life-or-death struggle to survive. Meanwhile, Arthur's tutor, Goyoku, stood behind him, explaining the grim political reality. The man had attempted to kill a royal, and in response, the royal family had only tightened its oppressive grip on the common people. Mordred, however, saw a different path. He knew that even if the crime went unpunished, the discontented populace would only find fleeting amusement in the execution. He resolved then and there to change this vicious cycle. He comments on the other man's magnanimity, asking if he might be allowed to speak his mind. The man, Tristan, agrees, questioning if this means the execution is called off. Tristan explains that dealing with the criminal is difficult, as the matter of Arthur's punishment is a decision of the state. Mordred, however, seems undeterred. He continues, reasoning that if he is forgiven, then Arthur, who is seen in his thoughts, will surely be saved as well. He mentions someone named Lancelot, then turns his attention to Arthur, declaring with conviction that this time, he will absolutely save him from the execution. Kay, blushing intensely, thanks Mordred and pledges her full cooperation for Arthur's sake, though Arthur himself looks on with confusion. With renewed determination, Mordred announces that they will stop the execution. Kay, flustered but resolute, agrees that they must think of a plan together for Arthur. The two fall into a deep, contemplative silence, searching for a viable strategy. After some time passes without progress, Mordred admits he has no ideas and turns to Kay, asking if she has thought of anything. Suddenly, an idea seems to strike Kay, causing her face to flush bright red as she breaks out in a sweat. The effort proves too much. Kay is now confined to her bed, suffering from a fever. Arthur sits beside her, gently placing a cool cloth on her forehead and telling her to rest. From the doorway, head maid Marianu observes, suggesting that the fatigue from their long journey may have finally caught up with her. Marianu tells Arthur that since Kay cannot help them brainstorm at the moment, they should ask someone else for assistance. Arthur listens, considering the suggestion. He exclaims that he's found the perfect person to rely on, someone kind and intelligent. Beside him, Kay looks on with a hopeful, blushing expression. The thought echoes towards a grand mansion, as if in response to a summons. From a mansion emerges the first prince, Rod Pendragon. Arthur greets him cheerfully as Brother Rod, while Rod strikes a confident pose, a smirk on his face. He trembles slightly, perhaps with anticipation or irritation. Rod's composure shatters as he furiously questions Arthur's calm demeanor, reminding him that his healing ability makes him a candidate for the throne. Kay calmly interjects, assuring Rod that Arthur has many supporters and he shouldn't worry, identifying herself as Maid 15. Rod is taken aback, while Arthur grins, proudly thinking of his brother. Now seated at a garden table, Arthur sips his tea and remarks on how quickly Rod came. He muses that his kind older brother seems to have lost his noble composure, thinking him to be depressed. Rod concedes that Arthur's situation is indeed different from his own and seems genuinely moved, acknowledging that Arthur will be executed if nothing changes. Arthur, however, finds his brother's sudden empathy unsettling and tells him to stop looking at him with such pity. Meanwhile, Kay worries that her subordinates are powerless and that the next king will face great difficulties. As Arthur contemplates his next move, Kay offers him some sweets, asking if there is anything she can do to help. Her offer sparks a realization. Arthur suddenly exclaims, "This is it." He turns to his brother and declares that it's better to call servants by their names. Rod can only respond with confusion. Taking the cue, Rod turns to Kay and questions, "Maid 15. She stares back, her expression unreadable. A knowing smile plays on Arthur's lips. He thinks to himself that everyone is human, after all. His thoughts then darken as he recalls a painful memory. In his previous life, he was betrayed by Goyoku. He breaks down in tears, yet his brother Rod looks on with a satisfied smile. Rod remarks that betraying one's subordinates is a sure path to death. Arthur, confused by this, wonders aloud why his personal maid ran away and asks Kay if she has a fever. Rod bursts into laughter, mocking Arthur for being hasty and mismanaging his people. He brings up the saintess, Elaine, noting that Arthur is always being compared to her and should see her cry sometime. He then sharply tells his younger brother not to address the saintess so casually by her first name. He reveals that Elaine has become his pen pal. As Arthur lies crumpled on the floor, Rod looks down at him and asks if he is crying. Arthur suddenly looks up, his demeanor changed, and urgently asks Rod what he must do to stop his own execution. Rod is taken aback by the abrupt question, shouting in surprise. Arthur explains that he is asking because his older brother is known for his extensive knowledge. He clarifies his true, shocking motive. He wants to save the very person who tried to have him executed. The revelation catches Rod completely off guard, his smug expression replaced with one of utter confusion. Kay, having observed the exchange from a distance, quietly asks if her brother is all right. Arthur, now seated at a table, looks down, contemplating what he should say next. He looks back towards Rod, reasoning that since his brother is well-versed in politics, he must surely know of some method to achieve his goal. Rod scoffs, remarking that while brothers should help one another, they are also rivals for the throne. He dismisses the plea entirely, stating there is no need to listen to the voice of the common folk, much less a condemned prisoner. Despite his harsh words, Rod firmly grasps Arthur's hand. Overwhelmed by this unexpected act of solidarity, Arthur bursts into tears of gratitude, thanking his brother profusely. He then pulls his younger brother along, striding purposefully out of the room as Kay follows closely behind him. He fumes, declaring that his brother is a favorite who only does foolish things. A nearby maid quietly agrees with his assessment. His anger builds as he proclaims that betrayal from a subordinate leads directly to death. As he sees, the maid tugs on his sleeve, saying his name to get his attention. He whirls on her, demanding to know what she wants. She presents him with an envelope, explaining that the love letter he sent to Saintess Elaine has been returned, still sealed. The prince is left speechless, a blush creeping up his neck. Later, on a hill overlooking a village, Rod explains to a weeping Arthur that the village's reputation has fallen, which is why Lubin was so quickly chosen for the execution. He then states plainly that brothers are meant to help each other. Meanwhile, the executioner Lubin sits alone with his thoughts. He reflects that he is to be executed for attempting to kill a man of ill repute. While he knows most will not openly resist the public sentence, he believes many will oppose it in their hearts, and he has resolved himself to his fate. Within the village, Arthur and Rod move in disguise. Arthur, wearing spectacles, confirms to a group of children that their noble brother, Prince Arthur, has forgiven Lubin. Rod watches from nearby, cloaked and holding a card labeled Disguise, remarking on his brother's good words. The plan is clear. The faction opposing the execution will approach Lubin, and at the critical moment, Arthur will use healing magic to save him from the guillotine. With a look of intense focus, he reaches out, his hand beginning to glow with power. He believes that if the people raise their voices together, they will have the power to overturn the execution. Before grand, closed door, Kay rushes to Morgan Le Fay with a worried expression. She reports that Arthur has confined himself to his room, and though she has stayed by his side, he remains withdrawn. This behavior follows an incident where dissenters stormed Arthur's public sentencing. It is unusual for him to emerge for such events, but Morgan clenches her fist, sensing there is more to his distress. She looks upon Arthur, who sits with his back turned, and thinks with a pained expression that he must be hurt. A wave of pity washes over her. As he rests his head on Kay's lap, she gently tells him not to be so downcast, assuring him that she is simply relieved. She explains that there was an anti-execution demonstration on the day of the sentencing, implying he was caught in a crossfire. From a distance, Morgan observes the scene. He refutes her comfort, insisting that he was the one at fault. Kate gently admonishes him, saying he shouldn't have gone there in the first place. Morgan's expression darkens as she overhears Arthur's name mentioned with such gravity. Her features harden with a sudden realization. This was no mere childish prank. Kay, however, remains firm in her belief, telling Arthur that he is not to blame. He rises to his feet, his face etched with anguish. With a trembling voice, he confesses to a stunned Kay that the child who stormed the execution was him. Elsewhere, a group of orphans gathers. One cries out that his older brother will be killed if sentenced. A boy in a hooded cloak and glasses steps forward, adjusting his spectacles with a confident smile, and offers his help. The hooded boy rallies the children, who hold up a large sheet as a banner. He shouts for them to incite the crowd, demanding that Prince Arthur, the brother of the condemned Lubin, be pardoned and that the execution be cancelled. The orphanage director watches in helpless dismay. The protest he instigated descended into chaos. A thug brandished a bottle, ready to strike the terrified orphans. Nearby, a young girl desperately clung to the wounded Lubin, crying out his name. As the situation escalated, a hooded figure rushed forward, unleashing healing magic in a desperate attempt to save him. The boy who led them could only watch, realizing it was supposed to have worked. He had been so sure of his success that he never considered failure, but he had been too late. He screamed in frustration as the guards moved in. Lubin's sister wailed for her brother while, in the distance, Arthur could only bow his head, having failed to escape in the confusion. Elsewhere, Morgan Le Fay recounted Arthur's words to Kay. She explained that he had claimed his actions were for the good of the people, and that he had asked her to keep it a secret from everyone. She paused, her expression thoughtful as she considered the weight of his confession. Their conversation was interrupted by the opening of a door. Arthur stood in the threshold, looking weary. Morgan called his name in surprise, and he acknowledged her presence. She turned to face him directly, her gaze intense. She told him that if there was anything he wished to ask of her, he should not hesitate. Before he could respond, Kay spoke up, explaining to Arthur that Morgan had been helping her and working very hard lately. Arthur remained silent, his head lowered. His somber demeanor suddenly broke as he burst into laughter. He looked at Morgan with amusement, asking if that was truly what she thought. He declared that all this time, he had been sure she hated him. She turned away, flustered, and muttered that she didn't particularly hate him now. From the side, Arthur watched her reaction with a faint smile. She is left momentarily speechless by his teasing. Arthur continues with a sharp grin, declaring that he finds Morgan scary, but only because she's a fool. Her dark aura flares as she retorts with a furious, "What?" The outburst seems to trigger a fleeting memory for him. A child's desperate plea echoes, a cry for Kay, for help. He pushes the thought aside, his smile softening as he asks Morgan if she really thought he was crying, adding that he isn't that lenient with Kay. His words leave her stunned, a hand pressed to her chest. In the background, Kay sighs in relief, glad to see Arthur seems to have regained his spirit. Morgan watches him depart in silence. As he leaves, Kay approaches Morgan, gently chiding that she's being a handful. The comment sends Morgan's thoughts back to their childhood, when Arthur would be scolded for the same things and would cry alone in the garden. The memory brings a sad realization. She concludes that it seems there is nothing she can do for him, a thought that fills her with sorrow. With this somber conclusion, she turns and walks down the darkened corridor, leaving a concerned Kay calling her name. Meanwhile, Arthur sits alone in the garden, reflecting on his failed plan. He had involved Lubin, holding on to a sliver of hope. That hope has now crumbled. He mutters apologies, acknowledging the failure of his naive strategy to save the man who was once like a brother. His frustration boils over as he clutches a book, exclaiming that he can't even correct his good deeds note. He feels that while Kay and Morgan have both changed, he remains stagnant. From a distance, the two maids watch him. As the open book reveals a stark message, it will not present the next task. He lay on the ground, his thoughts spiraling. He had wanted to help Lubin, but he was the one who ended up being saved. Nothing had changed. He had failed again. Fate, he concluded, could not be altered. As Kay reached out a comforting hand, he pushed it away, telling her to leave him be. The scene reminded Morgan of a past moment of despair. She recalled him falling, and her own harsh words echoed in her memory. If he was going to give up on this timeline, he should take the note she offered and commit suicide. Later that evening, under a crescent moon, Kay's voice broke the silence. She remarked that it was a cold night and that she would lower the curtains. She moved to his bedside, where he was now asleep. Holding a small candle, She watched over him for a moment and whispered her thanks. His eyes opened. He asked Kay to let him see her face once more, and she readily agreed. He gently told her she was being overly attentive, but she simply replied that she would always be by his side. Her devotion triggered a memory from his childhood. He recalled walking alone on a cold night, contemplating the many ways one could die: suffocation, being crushed, or dismemberment. Despite what others said, he knew he was not immortal. And so, with that grim realization, he had continued on. He stopped at the edge of a dark body of water, clutching a book. He thought of drowning, of being unable to breathe, and felt a strange sense of relief that it wasn't just a shallow pond. He resolved then to give up on this world. He stepped in, and the icy shock enveloped him. As he sank into the blackness, he could feel the intense cold, realizing just how deep the water must be. The memory of coldness bled into the present. He was in a bath, his hands submerged, feeling a familiar chill and ache as his healing magic activated. Kay's voice cut through his reverie, asking if he understood why it was cold, remarking how strange it was for him to say such a thing. He retreats into his memories, recalling a time from his childhood. As a boy, he looks down, then away, quietly murmuring a denial. He reflected on how differently people reacted to him. Kay would get angry and cry if his clothes got wet, while Morgan would just look at him, dumbfounded. The maids, like Mariana's group, would scold him, but he felt it was simply because they disliked him. He remembered that if he wrote a letter to Elaine, Tristan would call him strange. He thought of Beatty and the others from the orphanage, realizing with a start that so many people called him by his name now. But this thought couldn't erase a darker memory. His sister, Morgan, standing above him, had coldly told him to take a note and kill himself. The memory shows him walking away from her and then plunging into the water. Sinking into the cold depths, he felt that nothing had changed, that he was still the same. He wondered if he should try again, but the confusion was overwhelming. He no longer knew what to do. The darkness enveloped him as a single, desperate question formed in his mind. What should he have done? His last breath escaped in a trail of bubbles, rising toward the surface of the still, dark water under a crescent moon. He continued to sink, tears streaming from his eyes. He clutched his face, a silent scream forming as he questioned what was happening to him. Suddenly, a figure appeared at the water's edge. It was his brother, Mordred, who calmly remarked that he was out late. Shivering and soaked, Arthur looked up in shock, uttering his brother's name.